Hello there and a very warm welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I am Victor Matthias. Now, worried by the increasing cases of violence against men and women, a sexual offenders register has finally been opened in Nigeria with the aim to reduce the menace in totality or curb it to the barest minimum. Now, this is coming as the United Nations marks the day to end violence against women globally. So on the program today, we will examine the legal framework for the establishment of the Sexual Offenders Register and how it affects the conduct of Nigerians moving forward. But let's quickly bring you some of the major trending social media topics in the past week before we get to that.
Worried by the contents of the social media bill, some Nigerians took to the streets to stage a nationwide protest, urging their representatives at both chambers of the National Assembly not to vote for the bill. A global drive to protect women from violence was embarked on via social media to create more awareness on the plight of females suffering from sexual assault. The drive also dished out tips on how the girl child can protect herself from sexual predators.
Well, there you go, the trends on the social media, always something to talk about, always. But joining us to look at today's topic, we have joining us here in the studio, Baladale Adekoya. Thanks for joining us on the program today, Public Affairs Analyst.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. We also have joining us via Skype from Burnley in the United Kingdom, Olamide Akpejoye. Thanks for joining us as well on the program today.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Indeed. And then for the first time, we have joining us from Abuja via our virtual reality interface, Bukola Shonibare. Thanks for joining us on the program today. Let me first of all say that you're the first person that we're using this technology for on the program. So, of course, some drum rolls will come on for you.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed, you're welcome. So let me just start with you, Buki. So you have consistently, posted the need for, or posted the postcard talking about how the Chibok girls will be saved. I mean, you've done this for days and days and days. Now we have a sexual offenders list registered now in the country, and then we also have the UN, having a global push. That's the 16 days of activism, to see that the girl child is protected. I mean, just tell us a little bit more about this.
So the Sexual Offenders Register is one that we have waited for so long, especially because if we look at developed countries across the world that prioritizes the plight of women and girls and particularly promoting their rights, having a sexual offenders register is one step that they take in order to protect the right of women and girls. Now, what this does is it helps in having a unified system where we have collation of names of convicted sexual offenders. And with that, we're able to have information about who they are, their names, their locations. And when we have that kind of data and information, what it helps to do is it helps us in planning our laws and policies and actions to be taken in dealing with such people. Let me close by saying that it serves as deterrent, you know, to people. Nobody wants their name to be put on it. It's a name and shame approach, and I think it's a welcome development.
Oh, well, I think a lot of Nigerians will agree with you on that. But let me also go to Burnley and hear from Olamide what this means generally. Because so when you talk about sexual offense now, I think both sexes, I mean, have been found guilty, so to speak now. But is there any statistics as to, you know, what it is like on both sides?
Well, I can speak for women. It's a fact that 1 in 3 women have been sexually abused. Whether we have spoken up or not, it's a personal study that I have personally carried out, and we have, played it. It's a fact. So this is huge. Of course, it's not just for women. Someone asked me earlier, what if a boy has been abused? How does he does he also report? And I said, of course, this is not just for women, but it mainly protects the girl child, because the girl child is at the biggest, is exposed to this crime of sexual offense. Like I said, 1 in 3 girls, and it's a fact. It's not just hearsay. It's not just something that we are cooking up. We are trying to protect girls. We're trying to protect women in schools, in offices, in Nigeria in general. So I must say again that unfortunately we're 2000 and late, but we're happy that this is finally happening. And like Buki said earlier, this will prevent this from happening in future. This will, that it's a name them shame them approach now. We know that people are going to there's a website for people to report you. There's a website for someone to say, you know what, I've been sexually abused by this person. So that would curb this crime and this menace that Nigeria, is facing at the moment. So it's it's a welcome approach.
Fantastic. I mean, like she said, she was going to speak for the girl child, but let's look at it from the perspective of the boy child, as well. We've had cases rather, of boys being sexually abused, maybe by their helps or their guardians. I mean, this would, as they say, it's a name and shame approach. What do you think about it, basically?
First, let me say that this is a wonderful development. The National Register for Sex Offenders is the right step in the right direction. Majorly, there is a kind of a narrative, or let's say the belief is that most male child don't really get sexually abused, and that is fallacious, because it's just unfortunate that the gender that we are in is one that we have been raised up in such a way that we've been suppressed to keep quiet over the years. If you ask a lot of men, a lot of guys now, they will tell you that most of them lost their virginity to other house help when they were very young, either their aunties or sisters or something. So most times it's always very hard for them to speak up. But when you have an approach now that makes it easier for us to identify individuals that we give our children to help bring up, maybe when we're at work or something, and even schools as well, I think it's a good one. I think we'll be able to at least checkmate those ones that have been convicted. But my problem with the approach really is the word convicted. Now, we have a legal system, judicial system in Nigeria, where the trial of alleged sex offenders is usually very cumbersome. We saw the case of Timi Dakolo, and they said, okay, after 6 years or 7 or so, you can no longer try any rape case. Of course, they said it's status banner. So that means that if you don't speak up within that period, definitely you've lost the right to seek redress in court. That is one. Secondly, as well, how do you muzzle up this is a psychological issue now. Do you muzzle up the courage to speak up? That is 2. Then the third one, how does the court actually find the offender guilty or not? Now, most times, and I think Buki also will agree with me that most times cases that are rape or sexual offenses cases that are taken to court, most times they hardly get judgment. Probably maybe 3 in 10, they hardly get judgment. So that means that if you have a provision that it is unless these people have been convicted that they are going to be put in the sexual. So what happens then? What about those that, because of the lacuna in law, they get away? That is one. Then secondly, also now is that If we cannot put alleged sex offenders who have not been convicted by law, that means we've been infringing on their fundamental human rights.
Yeah.
How can we put them also now in the sex offenders?
Let me quickly get to Buki in Abuja studio. Buki, so he's raising concerns as to, the legal system at the moment, and he just made a case with one of the cases that we had just not too long ago. But how do you see us going past this bottleneck now?
The bottleneck of the lacunas in our law is one that, like he had rightly identified, has made it quite difficult for us to get convictions for sexual abuses, particularly the offense of rape. We know that the criminal law, the penal code applicable here in the North, and the VAP, the Violence Against Persons Prohibitions Act, has made provisions for this. But we have legal technicalities that are embedded in our laws that makes it quite difficult for us to get conviction. Let's talk first about the issue of bringing evidence. Because when you bring a criminal case, which is where rape and a lot of sexual offenses fall under, or all of sexual offenses fall under as a criminal case, you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. That's the standard of proof. And that onus of proof rests on the victim. Now, while the law did not say, oh, you have to bring medical reports, you have to bring this, the law requires that the victim must prove that he or she did not grant consent to the abuser. When we look at a lot of these technicalities, how does a victim begin to prove that, oh, I said no, I didn't grant consent? Or how will a child of 2 years old have to say that I didn't grant consent? So we have a lot of these legal technicalities, and I agree with the point that has been made that when we qualify it as convicted sexual offenders, it makes it a bit quite difficult. And I think that is one of the areas that needs to be reviewed and improved upon in this sexual offenders register. So I think that we need to come to the realities of today. Our judiciary needs to do more. The legislators need to look at all of these laws, the criminal code, the penal code, the criminal law, the penal code, the VAPA, and every other law to make sure that they align with today's realities and they do not serve as impediment or clogs in the wheel of achieving gender equality.
All right, let me just quickly bring Olamide back into the conversation now. Well, Olamide, I mean, so we've been able to raise some of these bottlenecks now, so to speak, that would perhaps make this register even be empty for quite a number of years. But, so are we going to be calling for a reform, so to speak, now? Because she's already making cases for, how we can bring some of these things into play. If we're calling for a reform, how long did it take before we got this in the first place? And how long would that reform, also take before we make those amends to make sure that, today's realities are also being, looked at while we're making further laws?
To be honest, thanks to social media, it's not going to take, breaking the bank to make this work or ensuring that these reforms are put in place. Like Buki just said, our laws are archaic. We are still relying on laws that from the 90s. There's been no amendment. There's still bottlenecks in place. And I read someone say that about over 100 cases have been set aside just because of technicalities in court, rape cases, that is. These reforms will not, it takes us to, come out and say, what, we are ready to ensure that these laws are amended and are up to date.
All right, very well. Let me just get to hear from you. What do you think about the Lagos and Ekiti states quickly, just before we go on the break?
Yeah, well, I think for the Lagos and Ekiti, I think they did something very novel with they started it, and I think it was started with Lagos, then Ekiti joined as well. Yeah. And there've been I've had series of cases in Lagos and Ekiti as well. Mirabel Center was doing something. This was in partnership with Mirabel Center, and there were some reported cases that were said. I haven't visited the site, so I wouldn't really know how many convictions they've had. However, I think the major problem that will be facing the register now is going to be, like Buki also says, it's going to be the law. And the law in this time around is going to take two shapes. One is we have a cultural and religious sentiment, just in the North. The law says that age of consent is 18. You understand? And of course, based on religion, you can marry anybody from 10 upward, 10, 12 upward. So definitely, so there is a problem. There's a mission.
Yeah, I was going to go there, but just hold your thoughts. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back to continue this discussion. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We still have with us Bola Dale Adekoya in the studio here, Buki Shonibare in the studio in Abuja, as well as Olamide Akpejere via Skype from Burnley in London. So I was going to come to the issue of, the cultural and the religious aspect of this whole thing. You were making a case about that, but you didn't round that up. So just quickly get that, and I will get to
in the 8th and the 7th Senate. I remember vividly some members of the Senate raised up some bills. And some of the bills also include giving women changing the age of marriage. When we raised up the issue of the bride,
not child,
not child bride,
child not bride,
child not bride campaign.
Yeah.
Then, and then a bill was raised in the Senate, and part of the portion of the bill was that the marriage for a girl is getting married, and she will have clocked 18, and that bill didn't see the light of day. Because majority of those in the Senate, of course, are those that are regionally sentimental to the religion that they practice. And we cannot really take that away from them. But the fact remains that we have to, I think majorly is that from what is at play now, we need an executive bill. Most bills have always been personal bills. If the presidency is sending a bill backed by the presidents and they say, see, we've had enough of this archaic tradition. People should, the girl child now, you should be able to wait till at least 18 before you get married to them or have any sexual interaction with them. Yeah. So at least maybe that will make him. And if the presidency is sending a bill, I think that will have more weight between both chambers of the National Assembly and see it pass into law.
Buki, what's your thought on this? I mean, looking at the fact that Nigeria is pretty much multicultural, and of course we have quite a number of religions. Talking about Christianity, the traditional worshippers as well as those who practice Islam. But how do we find a meeting point between all these religions, our culture, and then what we're trying to do at this moment, protecting the girl child from sexual offense, being a victim.
Thank you. In law, there is a test that is called the Repugnancy Test. And the repugnancy test usually comes up when we begin to look at issues around how different laws, customs at the local level, the extent to which they are repugnant to fairness, justice, and good conscience. Now, a lot of these customs and laws that we have at our local level, and I must say also, we also have some of them codified in our laws. For instance, the Penal Code. There's a section in the Penal Code that permits a man to beat his wife so long as it doesn't cause a certain level of bodily injury. When we begin to have such laws at, our national level, and even at the local level, you have customs, traditions, you have religious injunctions, then it brings to table what the government is doing to track the extent of how these laws and these policies and these customs, these traditions, these religious injunctions, to what extent are they repugnant to what we collectively agree, what we are talking about today. In moving forward, proper contextualization, proper sensitization, review of our laws to align with current realities, and we must keep track of all the laws and customs at local level and traditions that do not align with our current realities, and make sure that they are abolished.
All right, Buki Shonibare, you joined us from our Abuja studio via the revolutionary virtual reality interface. Thanks again for joining us on the program. And again, I would have to reiterate, you're the first person that we're doing this with on Channels Beam. Thank you very much for your patience and your time.
Thank you.
Olamide, I mean, so the whole issue of the family affair keeps coming on. Now, you find out that, some people are actually abused, and then they have to hold or suppress their feelings because they've been spoken to by maybe their traditional leader or their religious leader, maybe an aunt or an uncle, and they just hold it down and say, okay, it's a family affair, we'll sort it in-house.
Generation of our parents, they listen to religious leaders more. So I think that that's where we must begin to seek for help. We must begin to ensure that our religious leaders are more empathic towards ensuring that this menace comes to an end, because who do our parents listen to? They listen to their pastors, they listen to their imams, they listen to their small units, in these religious places. So I think that if we advocate, not just online, offline, and say, what, our parents need to begin to speak up more, our families need to be more involved. We need to, cut off this cultural belief of, keeping quiet and suppressing people's voices. And Buki and I have been working on a couple of things, and we've seen that, a bulk of these issues lie in the family. Coming out to say, we want to name these people, we want to shame them, we do not want to cover things up anymore. We want people to be held accountable. One of the problems that we have as a country is because as a people, we do not like to be held accountable. Families want to, hide things and, just say that, we don't want to bring shame, we don't want to,
So pretty much
spoil our family's name. So we need to do more in our families and in our religious gatherings. It's very important. This is the only way we can begin to tackle these things.
All right, very well. I hope, of course, you take that advocacy offline, and make those calls to the religious and the, of course, traditional leaders. But I have to say thank you, Olamide Akpejoye. You joined us from Burnley in England. Thanks for joining us and sharing your thoughts on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, you're welcome. Boladale, I have to say thanks as well for joining us on the program today and sharing your thoughts. Hopefully, in the very nearest future, all of these things that all of you raised would come to pass, and of course, would have that robust document that would, how would I put it now, protect the child, be it male or female. But again, thanks for joining us, on the program. And that's where we are. We'll be back in a moment with the most viewed videos on our YouTube channel in the past week. Please stay with us.
This week's most viewed video begins with the visit by Senator Dino Melaye to INEC headquarters, protesting the outcome of the Kogi West senatorial rerun election.
The petition elaborately contained 21 video CDs, and these 21 video CDs are documentary evidence of all that happened during the election.
It is followed by that of the arrest of 2 women over alleged child abuse in Nasarawa State.
I will be directing the MBC to take the following actions in line with the report of the Implementation Committee.
Third Spot sees the video of the Minister of Information stating the federal government's stand on internet broadcast content.
I will also direct the MBC to immediately come up with regulations for the broadcast of content on the internet and the web.
The claim by lawyer to former pension task force team, Abdurrashid Maina, claiming his client bled in court, takes the second spot.
We have wakened up this country. We have worked very hard wherever we found ourselves to make sure that APC has become a permanent body.
While President Buhari's promise to abide by the Constitution when it comes to his term in office takes the top spot.
I said you should read the Constitution, because I'm not going to make a mistake of attempting to have a third term or whatever term. Besides the age, I swore by the holy book I believe in that I will go by the Constitution, and the Constitution said 2 terms.
And there you go, the most viewed videos on our YouTube channel in the past week. Now, though Lagos and Ekiti states have had such laws in place before now, the prospect of having a nationwide register clearly excites many, if not all, Nigerians. So it is hoped that this will henceforth curb or reduce to the barest minimum cases of sexual assault in the country moving forward. And that's where we wrap the show up this week. Thanks as always for watching, and don't forget, the conversation doesn't end here. Let's keep it going via the social media addresses showing on your screen. Bye for now. I'm Victor Matthias.